Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dan Dickinson, founder and program director of Neurodiverse Inclusive Solutions. Before we get started, I just want to have a quick note. Everyone is muted, so we can keep the focus on the material. Feel free to drop questions into the chat at any time. We'll have some time at the end of the end to answer questions or follow up by email or run if we run out of time. But thank you for being here. And just to be transparent, setting this up where everyone is muted and questions go into the chat is actually me advocating for my own autonomy too. It helps me stay focused, stay regulated, and not getting interrupted while I'm sharing this information with you. In other words, I'm practicing exactly what we're going to be talking about today. This is a free and open session. My goal today is simply is just to help you walk away seeing PDA not as a behavior problem, but as a deep neurological drive for autonomy, and to leave with practical strategies for yourself and for the people you support. So a little bit about NDIS, Neurodiverse Inclusive Solutions. We offer workplace training, live coaching, and practical consulting built by autistic professionals for the real world. We combine lived experiences, research, and real world strategies, not just theories. Our focus is what actually works, not just what looks good on paper. Now, the drive for autonomy, it's not just about avoidance. So traditionally, PDA or pathological demand avoidance it was seen as an extreme resistance to everyday demands. It got framed as defiance or even manipulation. But what we now understand, especially through the lens of lived experience, it's that PDA is not about being difficult. It's an involuntary survival response. What looks like avoidance is really a desperate need to maintain autonomy with the nervous system perceives a threat. So it's not about just refusing to do things. It's about protecting dignity, safety, and emotional regulation. The shift in the mindset, this isn't just compliance. It's about survival. So why does autonomy even matter? Going a little deeper into this, when autonomy is removed, the nervous system treats demands as threats. So here's an example. Imagine you're working on an assignment, you're focused, you're feeling good, you're making progress, but it feels like it's yours. You own it. Then somebody walks up and says, you need to do this. You need to add this to it. Even if they mean well, and the work suddenly doesn't feel like it's yours anymore. You feel unappreciated. You feel like your effort wasn't even seen. You continue the work now feels almost impossible. Because to continue, you would have to push aside your own feelings and the ownership of the project. So what happens next? Your performance weakens. It takes longer to finish. You're drained afterwards. You need more recovery time than expected. You might even stay up late that evening trying to reclaim some of your sense of autonomy. Now, it's not about whether the task was hard. It's about whether it stayed yours. Loss of autonomy equals dysregulation. And that's when someone is dysregulated. The amount of pep talks, pressure, or rewards will not fix it. This is traditionally compliance-based strategies, and they don't just fall under PDA. They actively make things worse. So, what like bosses, managers, caregivers can do? To go into some real world, how are we supposed to respond to this? If you're a manager, boss, caregiver, or an ally, this is one of the most important shifts you can make. When you're supporting somebody with a PDA profile, your job isn't to enforce control. Your job is to create an environment where engagement feels safe, voluntary, and internally motivating. When autonomy is perceived, people don't just cooperate more, they bring their best selves to the table. Then they're more creative, more motivated, and more willing to solve problems because they still feel ownership over the process. So I'm going to give a kind of real world example here. So imagine a manager has a team member who struggles when given rigid instructions. Instead of saying, I need you to update this report by 3 p.m., the manager says, here's the updated information we need to capture today. We need to have this done by 3. How would you like to tackle this? Would you rather work independently first or brainstorm together? By offering control over the process, not just dictating the task, the manager gives back autonomy when appropriate. And so what happens? Well, the employee chooses to work independently. They finish the report ahead of the deadline. They they found and corrected any small errors the manager might not have noticed. And their engagement improves because they felt trusted and valid, not just micromanaged. Supporting autonomy didn't lower the bar. It simply raised performance. And now kind of going into a little bit of structures that work. Structured choices are less than are better than strict instructions. So supporting autonomy doesn't mean abandoning structure. It means offering flexible structure that allows people to stay connected to their own process. Now, people with PDA profile do better with clear expectations, but they need to feel they have control over how those expectations are met. If the environment feels rigid or controlling, their nervous system locks up. But if the structure allows choice, pacing, and ownership, success becomes possible and sustainable. Real world success examples would include something like if a parent needs their teenager to clean their room before a friend comes over. Instead of saying, you have to clean your room by 3 or you're grounded, and having that firm, strict structure, the parent can try something like, I want you to be ready for when your friend comes over by 3. How would you like to tackle that? The team then gets to decide how they're going to approach it and have control over the situation. In this particular example, let's say the team decides to set a 20-minute timer and then take a 10-minute break before their friend comes over. The parent can then help them setting that timer and letting them have the choice of how it's done. And then what ends up happening here? They clean their room without any fights, without any reminders. They manage their own energy with what they are capable of. And they're proud to show their clean space to their friend. They're proud and they feel accomplished in doing something that was their own. I can even share one personal example with this just the other day. My son what needed to go somewhere by a certain time. We had about 15 minutes to get out the door and start leaving. I kept reminding him, it's 15 minutes, you need to eat, you need to get your shoes on, you need to get your socks on, and we need to go. He immediately started to melt down. He couldn't get himself to even move. I had to take a step back. I thought about it for a little bit, and so I informed him, okay, let's look at the clock. We need to leave here at precisely this time. That's all I expect of you. All I want to do is make sure we're out the door when we need to be so that we're where we need to go on time. And I'm going to allow you to structure how you're going to do that. I then told him that I wasn't going to micromanage him and tell him what steps needed to be taken, but I do expect him to be out the door. And I did. I backed off. I got myself ready. I did what I needed to do. Turns out he was actually in the car before I was. Giving him that extra autonomy gave him the ability to structure it, and he did feel successful, and he did do it sooner than I had expected him to. So let's go into a little bit about what autistic individuals can do. Now, if you identify with a PDA profile yourself, or if you're someone who struggles with demand, you're not broken. You're not being difficult. You're simply protecting something fundamental, your ability to function safely. One of the most powerful things you can do is start advocating for your own autonomy early, before stress hits. When you hold your autonomy close, you don't just avoid shutdown, you stay in your zone of regulation. You protect your energy. You show others how you work best, and you invite them into collaboration instead of conflict. Now, I love sharing examples. One of the examples in this situation, a high school student with a PDA profile was struggling in a traditional classroom. Every day felt like a wall of demands, homework, deadlines, group project requirements, participation grades. Instead of fighting against the system silently, the student worked with the counselor to self-advocate using one simple framework. I can meet expectations better if I'm given options on how to participate. Can I show understanding in a project instead of timed oral presentation? Now, what happens with that? Teachers become more flexible once they understand the real need. The student still completes all major assignments without shutdown. Their grades stabilize, their confidence grows, and they even start leading a small group project all on their own. They don't have to be forced into traditional molds. They succeed because their autonomy was respected, not in spite of. With that, I want to go into a little bit of some self-advocacy tips. Now, self-advocacy is one of the most important skills a person with a PDA profile can build. It's not about being argumentative. It's about protecting your ability to function, to engage and succeed without burnout. When you advocate for autonomy early, before stress and shutdown hits, you create a condition for success. And again, let's go in kind of a real world example of this. You have an autistic employee with a PDA profile, just was getting overwhelmed by direct demands at work. Rather than quitting out of burnout, they started using a simple advocacy phrase. I do better when I can structure my own time. I'll update you when I hit any obstacles. So what happens here? The bus stops hovering with very clear instructions. They met every deadline with less stress. They actually exceed expectations. And their reputation shifts from being difficult to being reliable, proactive, and thoughtful. They didn't have to change who they were. They just found a way to communicate to their needs for autonomy. And it unlocks their best work. Now, I know I scheduled an hour for this. Usually I have room and just my pacing itself does go a little bit quickly. So we're probably going to be more about a half an hour today. So we'll have plenty of time for questions. And kind of going over a review of what we just talked about. And we'll zoom in for a second. Autonomy is not just personal, it's relational. It's critical, it's systematic. When you protect someone's autonomy, you protect their ability to stay regulated. You protect their creativity and problem solving. You protect their ability to trust you and to trust themselves. And it doesn't just help the individual. In workplaces, teams function better when autonomy is respected. Productivity goes up and retention improves. In families, relationships deepen because they're replaced power struggles. In schools, students who feel the autonomy, they'd learn better, not worse. Autonomy is not a luxury. Autonomy is regulation. Autonomy is survival. When you support autonomy, you're not lowering standards, you're raising outcomes for everyone. It starts with understanding and it grows with trust. And thank you for being part of the shift. I'm glad everybody's here learning about this. I want to take a minute to just kind of go over how you can stay connected, and then we'll go into any questions that came up. So you can go directly to our website, the NDIS LLC, and ask questions, follows up, just contact us through there. You can go into the chat here within Teams and ask questions as needed. If you do want to use Teams and raise your hand, I'd be welcome to unmuting your mic at this time and we can have an open conversation. And always through the NDIS website, you can sign up to receive our newsletter and you will get our May newsletter going forward. All right, and I'll open up some time right now just for any questions. Like I said, this definitely wasn't an hour-long presentation. I don't think anybody wants to hear me monologue for quite that long. But if anybody has any questions, if you want to raise your hand, I'll unmute your mic. If not, please comment in the chat or send me an email through our contact section on our website. If I do get questions afterwards, I'll follow up in an email. This is also being recorded, and a link to it will be on our May newsletter, so it can always be rewatched or distributed. All right, and at this time, I'm not seeing any hands or questions coming through. So I'm going to end this conversation now. Thank you guys for coming, and hopefully see you next month for our next webinar. Thank you.